welcome back to another episode of Susan LoPresti Wellness, Mind, Body, and Soul. This is the podcast where we explore the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to a woman's life, her health, and all aspects of navigating the midlife landscape. I'm your host, Susan LoPresti, and today's guest is Kwame Terra. Kwame actually broke a world record by walking more than 2 million steps in just 30 days, the same distance as the entire U.S. Gulf Coast. He set that mark to draw attention to the launch of his new company called Bear Health, which is a mobile app, which is about making lasting, community-driven changes for Black health equity. Kwame's not your average CEO. He's an endurance athlete, a public health advocate, and a tech founder. But the real story is how he brings unlikely pieces together. Think real-time health scores, movement as a celebration, and apps that are co-created by community voices. He makes these big headline numbers feel personal and actionable. And now he's setting his sights on the bEHRATHON this fall, which is a rally of 1 million people to walk, move, and take control of their own health journey. This challenge is something anyone can join, and I know that my listeners are going to be super motivated after hearing Kwame talk about his company and the challenges and the power of community. When you have community together, it makes working out and getting healthier so much more enjoyable, and just feeling a sense of wholeness with everybody else who's like-minded and is looking for the same type of goals. And that goal is to maintain good health for many years to come. So without further ado, Kwame Terra, welcome to my podcast. I am so excited to have you here today, and let's dive right in. Tell me a little bit about how you got started in this industry and what you're currently doing.
Thanks for having me on the show, Susan. I'm really excited to be here. I guess I'll start with the beginning of my health and wellness journey, which is really connected to running. So in high school and in college, I competed in long distance running, so cross country, college, track, and so on and so forth. And my dad was really, really strict with what we ate.
Oh,
And so, we never drank Cokes. We always made sure we had, a variety of fruits and vegetables in our meals and lunches throughout the day. And that was kind of the seed of it for me. But, when I went to college, I was pre-med. My goal was to become a physician. And early on in my academic career, I got introduced to research and really started to develop an appreciation for addressing the root causes of, most of the challenges that we face as it relates to health in our communities. And then after I graduated, I kind of went on this independent tour of conferences related to science and health, and really, again, just kind of it became, core part of, I guess, my brand, if you will.
mhm.
I hosted a screening of the documentary What the Health in Houston, Texas, in 2017 when it first came out. I actually went to the official screening in New York, got to meet Kip Anderson and the team over there. And yeah, just kind of became an advocate. But on some levels, it was more so just for my own personal development, right? So maximizing my own potential. It was never really about, at least at first, kind of sharing that with others and hoping that others kind of take on the same principles per se. And so it was actually the COVID-19 pandemic when I received a text message from my aunt just kind of speaking to the moment and how the virus was preying on the Black community. And, it's because we have all of these comorbidities, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And she just felt like this would be a good time for me to kick off my healthy eating initiative. That's what she called it, because I'm the resident, vegan in the family. And so everybody knows I'm into the healthy eating and whatnot. And so it was really that text message was the seed of what is now Bear Health, a startup company based here in New Orleans, where we essentially help people understand their current health status through a health score. So kind of like a credit score, but for your health. And what I love most about it and what my ultimate goal was with it was to obviously first communicate clearly to our community our current health status, but then be able to show how their day-to-day lives affect their overall health status. So if you go on a run or a walk one day or do a workout, your score is going to go up a few points that day. But
Mhm.
if you get 2 or 3 hours of sleep one night, your score is going to go down. And then based on those changes, we communicate potential health risk as well as connect you with healthcare providers and resources or communities to help you improve. And so that's kind of a short version of how I kind of got here today.
Oh, so you
Mhm.
owe it all to your aunt, actually.
Honestly, it's not obvious that I would have started a company had I not received that message. So
Right. That's great. So talk to me about your walking challenges
yeah.
because I can't believe how many hours a day were you walking?
When I first did the math, I thought I was going to be walking about 10 hours a day when I first did the math, on 2 million steps in a month, 66,000 steps a day. And on the first day, I probably walked for 14 hours. And
Consistently, no stopping,
no,
no.
definitely had stops, definitely had
Oh,
stops. So in the morning, the first day was actually a pretty busy day. In a sense, I did this on a whim. And when I say a whim, I mean I only spent about 3 days planning to do it. I had been thinking about it for, about 5 months, but as far as when I made the commitment to do it, it had only been 3 days. And so I woke up at 5 a.m. on day one. I walked for maybe an hour and a half or so, but then I had to drive over to the local track where I was training some people from my run club. And so now I'm there coaching. I'm just walking around the track as I'm giving them the workouts, telling them when to start and when to stop. But just again, I'm not stopping at all. And then I drive to the school. So my office is at Xavier University, Louisiana. And there's a fitness center and it has an indoor track. And so throughout the day, I try to stay close to my office just in case, I need to, go take a meeting or whatever. And so I'd walk around that fitness center for hours. I probably did, I don't know how many, but near at least a quarter of my steps in that fitness center, just walking in circles around around that small track. And then in the evening, once the day was kind of over and there weren't going to be any meetings that might have popped up or anything for me to address, I would just try to go somewhere. Like if I walked to the first day, I walked to a friend's house downtown. That took about an hour to get there. Then we walked together for about 2 hours. And by the time we got back to their apartment, they were beat, but I still had some walking to do. So now I'm kind of walking around the hallway in the apartment. And I finished my last steps just circling the island in their apartment. And I was just like, it was 11 p.m. And I was like, how am I going to do this for 30 days? I did like 67,000 steps that day, 31 miles. And I was just like, man, this is going to be hard. But then I was back up next morning, 5 a.m. walking. So,
that's incredible.
mhm.
So tell me about your app. What is that all about?
Yeah, so like I was saying in the beginning, the app again is designed to help people understand their current health status. And
Mhm.
so you're going to get a health score between 0 and 1,000 that represents your overall health. A low score is anything below 479 or 480. It's considered low and it communicates that you may be at risk for a greater risk for chronic conditions like hypertension, type 2 diabetes, some cancer, so on and so forth. Between 480 and 550, you're considered fair. So again, still kind of elevated health risk. Once you get into the good range, then on some level you can say that you're aging at a normal rate, right? So
Yeah.
that doesn't mean you're not going to develop any, chronic conditions, but you're probably not going to develop them any sooner than a normal human being might. And then 610 and above 610 is very good. 680 is considered excellent. Anything above 680 is considered excellent. And at that point in a sense, extending your lifespan, right? You're aging at a slower rate at those levels. And that's our ultimate goal is to get everybody on the platform to 680 or above. And the thing is, it's not just based on like your physical activity, right? It's comprehensive. So we have physical activity, we have mindfulness, right? So your perspective on your life and how present you are, sleep, your mental well-being. So truly how you're feeling and how that affects you psychologically, and then your medical health or physical health, which is your blood pressure, cholesterol, glucose, so on and so forth, and as well as your habits, right? So, are you a smoker? How often are you smoking? Are you a drinker? How often are you drinking? How much coffee? So on and so forth. So, all of this goes into your score,
Yeah.
and you get scored in each category. So while some users may, not be doing well in one category, they may be doing really well in another category, and it reduces their overall health risk. Not that they couldn't still get better in that other category, but that's really the idea is like, how healthy do you want to be? Let's make a plan based on that. You're not going to give up eating this? Okay, great. Let's see what we need to improve in other categories to ensure that you kind of mitigate the risk of what you're not willing to change within your health. And then, anytime you kind of fall off or you start trending downward, we can send you a nudge, or we can, you request that you check in with us and see if we can connect you to some resources that can help.
So someone who scores low,
Mhm.
you come up with recommendations of what they need to be doing. Is this like a generic recommendation or is it tailored to that individual itself?
Yeah, so we're still in the very early days of rolling out these kind of like tailored interventions or tailored solutions for folks.
Yeah.
We're actually right now just having people schedule a one-on-one session with us where we learn more about their current health challenges, right? Because if someone's not walking, so let's say, or taking enough steps per day, we could just say, hey, take more steps, but we have no idea what's going on in their life that may be leading to
Yeah.
them not taking as many steps. So our first goal is just to, get on a call with them, ask them how they're doing, what are they struggling with right now, and how can we help, whether that's health related or not, right? Because when it comes to when it comes to solving this problem, especially in the community that we focus on, the Black community, it's health isn't really a top priority for a variety of reasons, right? We're just trying to take it day by day, get through each day. And sometimes people just one need company, right? Yeah, just someone to talk to, just to know that there's someone else that cares, right? Outside of obviously, the family and so on and so forth. Just knowing that other people care. And sometimes that's enough, right? I've been on calls with folks and we just talk for like 30 minutes to an hour, and then we don't even get to health or anything like that. We're just talking, and then you see the trends change. So like connection is a big deal as it
Yeah.
relates to health. Obviously, I mean we have a blueprint to health that we kind of mapped out, and the first one is purpose and community. The first step before you're going to care about what you should eat every day or how much you should exercise and how much you should sleep. Like people need to understand that their life has meaning and that they're here, that they're not alone. And so that's one example of how we might connect someone. And then if it's we don't provide services at this stage. So we're not doing, health checks or anything like that. So what we do is we just recommend them to connect with someone else,
Right.
local provider. So yeah.
Right. So who do you see as the majority of the people that are using your apps? Are they male, female, and a particular age group that is
Mhm.
the majority?
Yeah, so there are a couple reasons for our current demographic breakdown, and I'll get into those. But so we're based in New Orleans, a predominantly Black city in the United States, and we partnered with a variety of communities to drive people onto the platform. So at first, we did what we called the Mardi Gras Steps Challenge. This was when we officially launched the app last year. Whoever took the most steps on our app won 5 grand
What?
during Mardi Gras. It was a phenomenal challenge. Over 100 people joined, and the age ranges were kind of all over the place, right? Because, everybody's interested in money. And most of us feel like we can take a lot of steps. After that, we partnered with a run club whose demographic was predominantly, I'd say, like millennial
Mm-hmm.
range. And so that drew a significant number of people onto the platform from that range. But then the following month, we were at Essence Fest. And if you don't know anything about Essence Fest, it's this major festival in New Orleans that focuses primarily on women. And we got about 400 users in 3 days. And so, they were pretty much all women. Middle age. So the majority of our app right now is I'd say middle aged Black women.
Uh-huh.
So right now the split is 71% women, 29% men. And again, the most engaged folks are the middle-aged women. And so that's good to see. It's always
Yeah.
good to see different activities that they're doing and be able to like and comment on them and them staying consistent. When it comes to early stage, you know, early stages of growing a company, you're trying to find people who have an urgent or like have the problem that you're trying to solve in an urgent sense and are willing to pay for it. And so that's kind of what we've kind of discovered here so far. And not that we don't plan to really expand beyond, where we've kind of found a niche right now, but for now, right now, this is who we're helping the most.
So for the middle-aged woman, what particular thing do you see most? Are they trying to lose weight? Is it something to do with menopause? Is it wanting to learn healthier ways of eating? What do you see the majority there?
Yeah, a lot of them just don't want to be on medication,
Yes.
you know? And so last year, and part of what drew a lot of people on the platform, last year I connected with a guy named Dr. Eric Griggs. We call him Doc, and he's a local health influencer. He's a community health doctor in the city of New Orleans. Very strong presence here. He's a health educator on Fox 8. So, he's very well known here. And I connected with him. I was doing some content work for him at a conference. And then he and I just got to talking and started working together. He kind of started mentoring me. And I told him that I had this idea of taking 1 million steps in 30 days to raise $1 million for our company. So this was last April that I told him that. And so he said he'd help me, train for it or prepare to take 1 million steps in 30 days. And so in May, we get to walking and, you know, I'm getting distracted by different things happening in the business, but he's staying consistent with it. Well, by the end of May, he had done 1 million steps, right? Again,
Uh-huh.
54-year-old man, I think, and he lost 20 pounds and got taken off his blood pressure medication. And so what started off as a campaign again to raise money for the company turned into a transformative experience for, this doctor in the city. And so now walking is this big thing within our community. So the following month, he passed the baton to me. I did 1 million steps in June. The
How long
following
did it take you to do 1 million steps?
in June, so the 30 days.
Oh,
The
okay.
30 days to do 1 million steps. So that was half as many steps as I did in April. Right. So that was 15 miles a day, about 5 hours of walking per day. Much more manageable for sure, but still, a challenge. The following month, one of my users had reached out to me and asked if we were doing any more challenges because we hadn't really done a major challenge since the Mardi Gras Steps challenge. And I was like, well, you want to try to do 1 million steps? And so like we might as well keep this thing going. Dr. Greg did it in May, I did it in June, so somebody's got to do it in July. And so this guy, he's a business analyst, I think, regular desk job, regular guy, did 1 million steps in 28 days
Wow.
and lost 28 pounds in the process and still walking to this day. And then the following month, we hosted a challenge called the Greater New Orleans Steps Challenge, where we broke the city up into kind of teams, right? So there's different parishes in the city. So there's Orleans Parish. So everybody that was in Orleans Parish joined that team. Everyone that was in on the West Bank, right on the other side of the Mississippi, joined the West Bank team. We had the North Shore. We had Team USA for anyone who like wasn't in the Greater New Orleans area on the app, because about 75% of our users are in the Greater New Orleans area. And so this turns out to be like the most engaging challenge that we have, right? Because it's which area can get the highest average step count. So
Uh-huh.
everybody is doing the best they can to like take as many steps as they can for their area. And two users walked so much that they were on pace for 1 million steps by the end of the month, by the end of that challenge, which was a week long. And so I was like, why don't y'all just, you know, go for the million? And again, just two regular everyday people who honestly had just got into fitness because, a run club had, they saw a run club and they've been looking for different ways to kind of get moving. And so they started moving and then they learned about our app through the run club. And then now they're just, counting their steps every day. And so then they do it in June. So two people, or in August, two people do it in August. I was trying to get another person to do it in September, but someone else ended up doing it in October, one of our users who lives in Puerto Rico. So that like walking off your medication is like the thing. And then there are other users who, haven't done the million steps but are doing half a million steps a month who have come down or off their medications in a matter of months just from walking.
That's
And it,
incredible.
it's really it's so encouraging. And when I think about what we set out to do here with Bear Health, which is to predict, prevent, and reverse the chronic conditions that plague our community, and to have already done it even just with one individual is so fulfilling and rewarding. Again, getting going back to my aunt sending that message and then us
Yeah.
executing on it and having a system. It's just yeah, it's great.
Wow, that is incredible. Where do you see your company going from here?
So right now we've been operating on what we consider our beta app. So we have a technology partner, a company called Dakadu. And if people want to, find out their health score, they can download Dakadu, use the podcast name as their access code, and go in there, get your health score, join a challenge, track your steps, so on and so forth. But we're going to be migrating. We received a generous donation from Dakadu last year to migrate us over to our own independent app this fall. And so we'll be launching that and really start to grow the brand nationwide. As I mentioned, we've been focused primarily here in New Orleans
Yeah,
just to kind of, get some learnings, figure out exactly how we want to bring our solution to the community. And now that we've got some learnings from that experience, we're ready to kind of take it beyond the city. And, you know, as far as what expansion looks like and growth looks like, in the future, I envision having a network of wellness centers, clinics, experiences, right? Health promoting life experiences that are all connected to the app. You have to have the app to be able to engage with or, participate in what we set up. And it'll all be connected and we'll know each individual's history, right? Health history.
yeah,
And if they ever need anything, we'll be able to provide tailored care at our clinics or you'll be able to tap into any experiences that we curate, like challenges or run club events or yoga and meditation events, right? What we're trying to do is create a health promoting life experience for our community. If 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 after I'm done with this, I've created a bunch of people who are obsessed with tracking their steps and their calories and measuring their sleep every night. Like that's not health. That's not what health is to me. Health shouldn't be this extra thing that you're doing. Health should naturally be the natural result of how you live your life. And so we want to curate experiences and a schedule in a sense that people can just kind of live into. And the natural result is health, right? We do need
right,
to track things because we can't improve what we aren't measuring. And so
correct.
we do need the app, right? And we're able to see not only individual changes, but we're able to see these trends on a, community level, right? So we'll see the average health score in the New Orleans area compared to the average health score in Atlanta. For example, let's say it's higher in Atlanta. Well, now we can go find out what is happening in Atlanta that's
Hmm.
not happening in New Orleans that we can apply to New Orleans to elevate the community health in the city. And so yeah, that's really where the expansion goes to. It's like how do we again, we have the tech, we need the tech to measure our impact, but how do we make it such that people's everyday lives are just health promoting? And so that's really where we're going as a company.
Wow, this is so impactful. This is going to help so many people who find you and download the app. So you need to give me all of your information that I could
Yeah.
put in the show notes. Okay, let's talk about I want to go with a woman because my podcast is really geared towards women. So a Black woman who is overweight, has high blood pressure, maybe borderline diabetic. And it's overwhelming because if you go to a doctor and right away they're, pushing prescription meds, and I'm totally not into prescription meds. I'm all about healing ourselves because I know that our bodies are capable of doing that.
100%.
What do you tell a woman who's facing this particular challenge?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, you didn't develop the condition overnight.
Right,
And so a solution isn't going to be overnight, right? If it took you 20 years to develop a condition, it might take you a few months at least to get rid of it. The second thing is I kind of help them understand what disease really is because medicine cripples us, the medical system cripples us in many ways mentally when it comes to health, right? We go into the doctor, we're given a diagnosis, and we're told we have to take this medication for life because we now have this condition. Or, well, it runs in your family, and so it's not, don't feel too bad because your parents had it, so it's not a big deal. And so that even more so makes people feel like they're going to have to be on the medication for the rest of their life. But especially conditions like hypertension, right? Type 2 diabetes, these are entirely preventable conditions on the whole when it comes to depending on when you develop. Like if you were born with it, obviously it's different than
right.
if you develop it later in life. And then I'd help them understand what disease really is. So if you break down the word disease, it's dis-ease, right?
Yeah,
Not at ease, not balanced. And generally two things cause something to be imbalanced. You either have too much of something that you don't need in the system or not enough of something that you do need in the system. And in the US, we have way too much stuff that we don't need, right? Ultra processed foods, right? Lots of stress, toxins in the water and all this stuff, right? And not enough nutrients in the food, right? Or we're not getting enough. There's less nutrients in the food now than before, but there's still enough nutrients in the food for if you're eating the right foods to get what you need.
yeah,
And so then as a consequence, we are all diseased, right? The majority of us are diseased. But as you mentioned, our bodies know what to do, like know how to heal. And so if you just remove the things that you don't need and add the things that you do need, the natural result is health. And so it is that simple. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday at a conference, and he said, he was dealing with high blood pressure, and he said he's not anymore. I'm like, well, what did you do? He said, well, I stopped smoking, stopped drinking, started running, it's gone. It literally is that simple for when it
yes,
comes to these types of conditions, especially if you're getting through them early on. But you do have to sacrifice. You have to make a sacrifice,
yes,
or not, and you're going to have to be on medication. And because the medication is restoring that balance in a sense, right? Though artificially. And then, you know, the first thing is find a community that either a community or a friend who is on this journey with you. And I think that you need three things really to stay consistent when it comes to like your health goals. So you need a community that you're doing it with, right? You need a strong why, like you want to be here rather than not, or deal with the condition rather than not. You need, I think, beyond just getting healthy, you need some sort of objective connected to it, right? I think that's part of why our challenges have been so useful for people. There's a 70, I think, 3-year-old woman competing with a 26-year-old or a 29-year-old guy in our step challenges. She gets like top two, three every month the challenges. She's a beast, and so like having that, I think is again an additional component, but having some sort of objective that you're building towards and that you can recognize progress toward on a
yeah,
regular basis. That could be I want to compete in a 5K in 3 months, right? So we could just tell everybody take 10,000 steps a day and you'll be healthy. And sometimes that works, but if we say, hey guys, we're all preparing to go walk/run this 5K, let's all train together. It's not necessarily about the grind of the training, right? It's about us all working together toward this objective. And that's that again, that is what life is about.
Community, right? Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I would recommend that they again find a community, find an objective, and on a deeper level, look at this as an opportunity to learn how to not be a slave to your body. Our bodies are, powerful and they want what they want when they want it, but there's nothing more important than that will that you have within you to achieve or become whatever it is that you want to become or achieve in life. And this is an exercise of that. The final thing I would say, kind of, I guess, a side note on it, is to explore fasting. So I don't know if you practice much fasting, but
Yes, intermittent fasting.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
highly recommend that. I think when it comes to eating, I can break this down as simply as I can. When we're in the fed state, when we, have, calories from food that we consume, our bodies are working, right? They're doing all of what they need to do to process that food, turn it into energy for, all intents and purposes. And that's fine. We have to do that. When we're in the fasted state, like once we burned through all of the calories that we consume, our bodies kind of switch to rest and repair,
Mhm.
right? So it gets time to go through the body and find out where there's some dysfunctional cells and proteins that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, where I could kind of go clean up, right? We need both. But in the US, we're always in the fed state. We wake up and we put something in our body, either, super sugary coffee, you know, pastry, and then we're eating throughout the day because we're hungry for different reasons. We're stressed, and then we're, eating until we fall asleep. Our
Yes.
bodies do not get, your body has to have time to rest and repair, or it won't. It won't do it. And so that's what's so powerful about fasting is that it gives the body a break from processing food for energy, and it can focus on rest and repair. And it has recently been coined as the most powerful tool for extending your lifespan, because what it does is, and our bodies are so smart, when it's looking for energy for, because our bodies still need energy once we've run out of the energy from the calories we've consumed, but there are the average weight person has about 100,000 calories stored in their body. Average weight person, right?
Wow.
And so while you may feel like you're hungry, your body has the resources that it needs to continue. Hunger is primarily driven by a hormone called ghrelin,
Right.
which is released based on your eating schedule, not necessarily based on when your body needs nutrients, right? And so, but anyway, our bodies are so smart that when we're in the fasted state, we go and break down old, damaged, and dysfunctional tissues and cells and proteins and turn them into newer, younger ones. So fasting, in a sense, literally makes you younger. And that's why we see things like in this animal study where they had two groups of mice. One group was allowed to eat whenever they wanted, right? Whenever they felt hungry. But then one group was restricted to only eating between the hours of 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. That's actually kind of where that schedule for intermittent fasting came from, this study. The group that was only allowed to eat between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. lived 30% longer.
Wow.
They ate the same amount of food. They ate the same food. The only thing that was different was that one had a fasting window and one didn't. And 30% longer. That's so significant. Right?
Yes.
And the same mechanisms that turn on in those mice that led to their longevity turn on in us when we fast. And so, whatever it is, and again, it's like going back to the willpower, being able to again control what you put in your mouth is the strongest act of one, self-love for you and your body, but just again, agency and feeling like you're in control of your life is a part of your health,
Yeah.
right? If you feel like life is happening to you, well, then that's stressful. And being able to voluntarily decide, what you do, independent of your cravings and whatnot. And again, I know it's much different for women, So I'm not even going to pretend that I understand. But regardless, I do know that when you are in control, you feel better overall, right? And so, yeah, that's what I would say. I know that was a pretty long answer, but yeah,
No,
find a
it's
community,
great.
find an objective, understand what disease is. You have high blood pressure because there's too much of something in your system and your body's trying to compensate for it. And so remove whatever is too much. In that case, it's, fried chicken and too much salt generally. And remove it, and then your body won't have to do that. It won't have to make your blood pressure high
Right.
to accommodate. That's all the majority of disease is.
Kwame, one question on the intermittent fasting.
Hmm.
How many hours of fasting do you feel is the most beneficial?
Yeah. You know, the time frame that I just explained with the mice, 8 hour window,
Yeah.
16 hours of fasting,
Yeah.
the how that converts to humans, because we age at different rates, that's still to be determined what that frequency is.
Okay.
I think to start, what I recommend for people is don't eat within 2 to and ideally 3 hours of going to bed,
Right.
right? So if you go to bed at 10 o'clock, not a single bite after 8, really after 7.
7. Yeah.
And that, side note here, there's a gentleman who's kind of been investing a bunch of money into extending his lifespan, and he tracks everything, especially sleep. And he's the first person ever to get a perfect sleep score on the Aura Ring for 30 days straight. 30 days straight, perfect score. And he attributes it to the time between his last meal and his bedtime, primarily. Now, figure out how that works in your day-to-day life and how it doesn't, so that it doesn't interfere with your social life. But if you can stop eating at 6, that's even better. If you can stop
Mm-hmm.
eating at 5, even better. Because the more time that your body has to process and digest before you go to sleep, so that when you're sleeping, you can focus on rest and repair.
Yeah.
That's in your sleep is just way better as a result. So yeah, I would just say at least 3 hours before you go to bed, no eating, and then don't eat anything within the first hour of waking. So if again, and this is assuming that people are trying to do 6 to 8 hours of sleep per night. So 6 to 8 hours of sleeping, 3 hours of fasting before you go to sleep. So that's what's that, nine to 11, plus 1 hour when you wake up. That sounds about right to start, right? So that's like 13 hours.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good start. And then I would say getting it down to, so I shoot right now, I'm consistently around 18 hours of fasting per day. I feel best when I'm doing 20 personally, but I do think this is going to vary from person to person. But at minimum, I think people need to be fasting 13 hours a day. And then in the mornings, again, just kind of play around with it. Everybody's kind of different, and women in particular, I think, should start their fasting window in the evening and eat in the morning. So some people, like for
Uh-huh.
me, I typically would when I would do fasting, or when I first started fasting, I would go basically the whole day without eating, and then I'd eat in the evening, and then that'd be it. Maybe snack on some nuts in the afternoon. But I think women particularly need to eat in the morning. And so I would, have a big meal in the morning, maybe a small lunch, and then, kind of either snack or just kind of cut it all out around, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And that would be the eating schedule I recommend, particularly for women.
Why do you recommend women eat in the morning? Any particular reason?
There are hormonal differences,
Okay.
particularly as it relates to cortisol in the morning.
Okay.
And I'm not versed enough on it to speak on it right here in a real way. Sometimes I learn things and then I just apply them
Yeah.
it's not that I digest it enough to be able to really break it down and explain
Yeah.
it. Because I
I
just I
see.
don't want to say that here, but yeah, I would look into it. But
Okay.
but it's related to hormonal and the stress that is associated with not having food in the morning, and so that'd be my recommendation as it relates to fasting.
Great.
The guy
Thank
the guy
you.
that I referenced, he eats between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. every day. So he has a 20-hour window, but he ends at 11 a.m., which again, that's not something I think I can adopt at this stage. And I don't think most people can adopt that. But again, this is it's the more time between your last meal and your bedtime, the better your sleep will be. And honestly, after purpose and community, sleep is the most important thing for your health.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you got to decide between sleeping and working out, sleep.
Yes.
You know,
I
you,
agree. I agree.
know,
That's great. Kwame, thank you so much. You provided my audience with a ton of information, really valuable. I appreciate you coming on. I love what you're doing. I wish you the best of luck going
yeah,
forward. And I'd love to have you come back on again and give
yeah,
us an update of what's going on and how far your company has advanced. So I would also like to leave in my show notes where
hmm
people can find you, your app, how they could
yeah,
get involved in your challenges. So please provide all of that information to me. We'll
yeah,
communicate through email
yeah.
on
We'll,
that.
yeah, we'll do, we'll do. I actually
Okay,
wanted to share
please.
last bit. You'd asked in like the profile of the person who went to the doctor and learned that they have hypertension, they may be overweight or obese. There is a new, I don't know if it's a new metric, but it's now being kind of put forward as a better metric for determining if your weight is a problem, right? So obesity, a lot of black women are obese, and it's, the problem with BMI is that it doesn't account for, distribution of weight, like where is the fat, right? In that
Yeah,
matters. And so a lot of us have kind of thrown out the concept of BMI, and honestly, it's I don't know if we should throw it out entirely, but it's just incomplete, and it doesn't tell the whole story. And so a better metric is height to waist ratio. So BMI is height to weight ratio. That doesn't account for if someone is super muscular or if they're carrying a lot of weight in their bottom or in breast, for example. But height to waist ratio addresses what is really problematic about excess weight, which is excess fat in the abdominal region,
yes,
right? Which is there's a clear line between excess fat in the abdominal region and metabolic disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, so on and so forth.
yes,
And so I recommend all women. This applies more to women than men, for sure. And especially black women, right? Because tend to be particularly curvy. Go, you know how tall you are in inches. So let's say you're 5 feet tall, 60 inches. You may already know your waist size, but if you don't, just kind of grab a string and then measure it up against some measuring tape. And if you're 5 feet tall and so 60 inches, your waist needs to be 30 inches or smaller. If it's above that, then I'd argue that you are at greater risk, and that could be the new definition of obesity or being overweight is how much bigger your waist is than half your height, right? So again, if you're 5'4", 64 inches, your waist ought to be 32 inches or smaller.
hmm,
And if it is, but you're still technically overweight or obese by BMI, I wouldn't worry about it too much because your blood pressure is likely okay. Your blood sugar levels are likely okay. Because that's really all that matters when it comes to, or it's not all that matters, but those are the real indicators of your
yeah,
current health status. Even in our app, which I think is something that's pretty cool about it, is if you are quote unquote again obese, have a BMI over 30 or have a BMI over 25 for overweight, but your blood pressure is normal, your glucose is normal in the app, it's not going to really affect your score that much that you're overweight or obese. So it takes into consideration all of these factors, and so as well as your activity. So just yeah, I wanted to share that. I think that's been really helpful for women in particular, as I've shared that with them. And so definitely check it
yeah,
out. Now, if it is above that, we gotta get that waist down.
yeah.
You're right. We gotta get that waist down if it is above that, and that's okay. That's what we're here
Yeah.
for.
It's doable. Start walking.
Exactly. That's it. That's it.
Walking is the simplest exercise. It's enjoyable. You don't need to be power walking. You could, after dinner in the evening, especially in the summertime, go out and take a nice stroll. And if you do have diabetes and you test your sugar before you leave the house and test it when you come back, most times you're going to see that your sugar has dropped. and it's as simple as a nice stroll.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. And I love what you're doing, and I wish you the best of luck on everything. And I want you to come back again.
Yeah,
Kwame,
yeah.
thank you so
Happy to be back.
much. It
Thank you
was a
so much.
pleasure to meet with you and hear everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Talk soon.